Hi, welcome to my short film about comic books, about comic book creators, making comics, what inspires them, how their process of working, and how to finish that project that you started. We're going to go to Copenhagen. We're going to Zinefest first, and that is a small event of very creative, independent, small press artists and writers. Let's see what happens there. Well, I'm at Zinefest. It's kind of fun. Lots of people. Let's see how it goes. Okay, how would you describe your work?
Well, I would say that my fanzines and prints and almost everything that I do is related to or has something to do with animals. And it's very raw, not really finished, not really produced, because that's the style that I like.
What inspires your work?
Nature, mainly.
Okay.
And yeah, animals. So there's animals in everything that I do.
Do you find it hard to finish projects, or do you think it's easy? Or what advice would you have for finishing work?
I think it depends on how finished you want it to be, but I think for me, it's about having fun. So I could do one right now with a pencil and that would be finished for me. It depends.
Welcome back. Now we're going to do an interview with Martin Eden, who is a prolific independent comic book artist and writer, and he is going to talk about his process of working and finishing projects and what he's been up to with his new project Zeros. So, Martin, prolific independent comic book creator from London. Your first comic book series, The Omen, stop me if I get anything wrong here. The Omen ran for 13 books and was described as an epic superhero soap opera and was nominated for the Best British Comic Book Eagle Award.
Yeah.
And your second comic book series, Spandex, ran for 8 books and was about the world's first all-gay superhero team. And Spandex received a lot of acclaim online and in newspapers, and Q magazine said it was the 6th best comic of 2012.
Yeah.
And now your latest comic book series, Zeros, is well into volume 2, and the series differs from your previous work as it's a web comic aimed at all ages. Martin, do you ever find time to sleep?
No, because I think maybe a lot of creators get this, but I quite enjoy not sleeping because you get ideas for stories in your head. And sometimes you're just lying there at night and you got idea after idea coming in, like stories ideas, and that's really great. Like I really like it when my stories write themselves.
How would you describe your style for people that wouldn't know?
So for my comics, so what I tend to do, because I've been a Marvel comic fan since I was 10, and I love all sorts of comics, you know, DC, Vertigo, indie comics, stuff like that. So it's all seeped into me, and so I tend to create kind of superhero comics, but there's like they're always a bit more like a soap opera,
Right.
and I've always got lots of all my characters tend to be a little bit quirky or interesting. Otherwise, there's no point, is there really? And I always make sure that there's some massive twists. I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of Grant Morrison's comic writing, especially the early stuff like Invisibles and Doom Patrol, where he'd throw in a twist that would make you want to read the whole series again. So that's I love that sort of thing. So that's what I think it's quite common. I create a comic that I'd like to read myself.
How do you say so driven? You're on your third series, and they're quite big series each, the previous two. So how do you keep yourself motivated to come up with new ideas?
The ideas kind of just come to my mind. I think one of the advantages of what we do is that it takes so long to do it. So for instance, like an issue of spandex will probably take me about 3 or 4 months to draw and finish. So during that time, you're thinking ahead to the next one and the one after. So normally, by the time you finish that issue, you've got the next one written, at least in your head. So yeah, I could probably. I hate it when I have to force ideas or force writing to come, but I can do it.
How much planning do you do before you start writing? Is it like, does it develop during the process of making the book?
For instance, when I started Spandex, I was desperate to start it, and I just didn't have all of the characters nailed down. There was still a couple that were left to sort out, but I think you get to a stage where you just have to start. Like I started Spandex and I still hadn't figured it quite all out, but I was able to make a start. And even Zero's volume 2, I just couldn't decide how to start it, and it was ridiculous because I had loads of ideas, but I just needed to get the right idea how to start it, and I got there in the end. But I think just don't let it stop you, don't let it delay you. Like, get on with other things, like start designing characters. If you don't have the first issue nailed down, try and work on the second and third one. It's always good to try and keep going.
Where do you find your inspiration for your writing?
I mean, I read a lot of comics, so I get influenced by the pace of different comics. So I'm a big fan of the comic Love and Rockets, and
cool.
So that is kind of seeping into Zeros a bit. I really like Love and Rockets because they can do a 5-page story where literally nothing happens. It's all like character based, and I love that. I'd love to do a comic where nothing happens, but unfortunately my imagination runs away with me. I'm not like looking at stories and going, oh, I must steal that one. It's just more the kind of energy of what I'm watching or reading.
When were you with Spandex, and you were sort of first person to do sort of an all-gay superhero team? How did it feel to be sort of blazing the trail for before it became sort of more mainstream as it is now?
It was an inevitable thing that was going to happen, that someone would do a gay superhero comic, superhero team comic. I was very lucky. I had the idea, and a lot of it was based on my friends. I just wanted to show gay characters as normal people that go to the pub just like everyone else. I mean, gosh, this was like over 10 years ago, and things changed so much. It seems like things have progressed really, a lot since those days. The first issue of Spandex took me a year to create because I was learning Photoshop.
Right.
And I was really nervous that someone else would come up with, put a gay comic out before I was able to,
Right.
and luckily they didn't.
Mm.
It's always been, people love spandex. It kind of attracts people. It's a really easy comic to sell.
Right.
Because now that I'm doing zeros, I'm very, very proud of zeros.
Mm.
I think it's the best stuff I'm doing, and but the hook just isn't quite as as immediate as, I mean, when I used to do conventions, comic conventions,
Yeah.
people would just come to the table, and they'd see my posters of the 50-foot lesbian and the pink ninjas, and
Yeah.
they'd have a little chuckle, but there's an instant connection there, and
Yeah.
it's I was very lucky with spandex, definitely.
Yeah, and you got a lot of attention at the time, didn't you? You had like Q Magazine and the Metro and Guardian newspapers and whatnot. Was that strange being an independent comic, or
It,
or
it was really shocking. I mean, I when I started spandex, I really wanted to get the word out, and it's really hard to do that. The hardest part is knowing who to approach,
Hmm.
you know, how to email your press release, who do you send it to? So
Yeah.
I asked a friend to help me. He works in marketing,
Hmm.
and he sent the press release out to a lot of his contacts, and that's where it kind of took off, because the Metro, as you said, did a newspaper feature on it on page 3.
Right. Wow.
And yeah, the Sun did a feature on it online. It really just exploded
Wow.
overnight. It was incredible. I was shocked. I had 1,000 orders for the comic
Really?
overnight.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
which is unbelievable.
Kind of like the indie comic dream, isn't it? To sort of have a
Yeah.
massive hit.
Kind of,
Yeah.
but then you have to reprint, and then you have to
Yeah,
get
you
your
got
friends to
print them.
help you write all the envelopes. But
God, that must have been a nightmare. But to be on the Metro paper on the underground, it must have been kind of funny to see it there, you know. And
it was
well,
really incredible, and you know, I had a really mixed reaction. I had a lot of people that were really supportive. I had a lot of people that were quite negative. It was really interesting, and I learnt at that stage, never read the comments.
and all your comics are in the same universe. So this, what attracted you to doing a shared universe?
I've always enjoyed comics like X-Men
Hmm.
and Sandman, and they are series that kind of sprawl around. They sprawl into different series,
Hmm.
different limited series, stuff like that. So
Hmm.
the connections, on a general level, they aren't all massive. Like, they are set in the same universe, but it's not as if you need to know Omen inside out to enjoy spandex.
Right.
So there are little Easter eggs, and there's little
Yeah.
little things that you can enjoy if you know both series, and
Yeah.
and the overall bigger picture it will all collide. In zeros, everything will be resolved
Yeah.
with a different series. So I just love series where there's like loads of different characters, because
Yeah.
basically, if you get bored with one character, you can just go on to a different one.
Why did you choose to do an all ages comic this time? Because Spandex No Man was more sort of adult, wasn't it? You know.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, I was a fan of Vertigo comics
Yeah.
in the 90s and the noughties, and they are
Hmm.
obviously comics for mature readers, which was fantastic. Like, what they did, what they achieved was just incredible.
Yeah.
And I kind of followed that kind of fashion. I just loved being able to swear in my comics. I loved being able to show really violent scenes, really mature scenes. So
Yeah.
that was what I really like to do in spandex and Omen. But with the with zeros, gosh, well, 'cause I started zeros about 4 or 5 years ago,
Hmm.
and I had a young nephew and a young niece, and I really wanted to do a comic for them.
Right.
They're a lot older now. So, but they really like zero. They love zeros, and they're called Harry and Emily, and there's a character called Harry and a character called Emily in zeros as well. So
Ah,
they
cool.
like that. Although I had to explain to them that sometimes this isn't you. They're not always nice people. So don't be upset.
Yeah.
And I think also a lot of critics and reviews were saying that my art style was quite young and cartoony. So I decided to
Mm.
kind of take that to my advantage, because I do think that's true to some extent.
Mm.
So the art style does change throughout Zeros. Like Volume 1, when the characters are all 8 years old, the style is very cartoony, and the colouring is kind of crayon style.
Okay.
And in Volume 2, they're 10 years older, they're 18.
Mm.
So it's a little less cartoony, but you can still see my style.
Okay.
And the colouring style is kind of marker style, so
Mm.
it's
Mm.
rough.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm kind of playing to my own strengths as an artist, or weaknesses.
What do you think people get wrong when they start making comics?
Like, there's a couple of things I would say. I'd say distraction is one of them. I think you need to be dedicated to your series. You need to not lose focus, because when I used to create comics when I was in my teenage years,
Mm.
I would start an issue of, say, the Wonder Men, and then get bored of that after a couple of months and start off on the Space Scouts. And
Right.
so then I get bored of that, and then I'll go off and do something else. So
Okay.
I think, and I noticed that with some creators now, that they get they're working on their comic, but they kind of think, oh, I'd rather be doing that one, to be honest. I think for me, I still get that urge to do something else, or I get an idea, and I think what I tend to do is I tend to factor that idea into what I'm doing at the moment,
Right.
so that I make it work, so that I'm not going to start something new. I put the new idea into what I'm doing at the moment.
Mm.
And the second thing I would say, second problem really when you start a comic is procrastination. Just get on with it. Just do it. Just
Yeah.
make a start.
Mm.
Just don't let self-doubt put you off. Just start it.
Okay. What advice would you give to new comic creators wanting to write and draw their own series?
I would actually go from a practical angle, and I would say just be careful with your money. Just get a good deal for, like, if you're printing one issue, get a good deal. Maybe
Mm.
just don't print too many to start off with. Just see how it goes.
Yeah.
Just take baby steps with it. Also, don't get disheartened if you go to a comic convention and you don't sell many copies, because every convention is different, and if you don't sell many copies, it means you've got loads of copies left over for the next convention, so you'll be okay. Yeah.
But what would you say was your secret to a good story?
So I mean, you know, there's different types of story. I mean, as I mentioned before, I love a good twist. I love something that is kind of fairly obvious from the start, and then you kind of turn it on its head, and then the reader has to go back and read it all again. I really like good character moments. Like I mentioned before, I'm a big fan of Grant Morrison and his Invisible series. It was very high concept, and what I really liked about it was just when you'd have a really interesting, touching character moment, like a little comment or something. It's just really human.
Yeah.
Just really amazing to get that kind of human touch across in a comic. So
It's funny when a comic actually creates an emotional reaction when you read it. I think that's often surprises me, because I think like TV, it's a bit more easy to make an emotional reaction, but comics is more tricky.
because in TV and movies, you've got the music. You know,
Yeah.
you've got a sad scene, and if you throw in a piano or an orchestra, then
Yeah.
I'm going to be weeping. But
No.
it's actually an ambition of mine to try and make people cry reading my comic. It literally is, though. I think it's fascinating to see what you can. It's just a piece of printed paper, isn't it? So how
Yeah.
can what
Yeah.
can you do to kind of provoke that sort of response from a reader? I really try. There's some very sad scenes in my comics.
Yeah, it's funny. It's got to be like that perfect sentence, I guess, which just creates that emotional reaction, and you knowing the backstory of a character, and then yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. What's your top tips for finishing a story? Because I think a lot of comic book creators, they do 1 or 2 issues and then they stop, or they run out of steam or something.
The sad thing when you know, comic creators kind of disappear sometimes, or you know, I started creating my own comics in the late 90s and started doing conventions around that time, and it was a classic. It was such an amazing time. You know, there's always the
Yeah.
big conventions, like the best convention in London at the time was in Bristol every year in I think it was around Easter, I think. I made so many friends, and yeah, you do. I used to follow some series where you'd never really heard from the creator again, and it is actually really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like everyone's still doing things. I mean, like look at me. I mean, people heard about my spandex and Omen, and they might think, "Oh, where's Martin gone?" And I'm still there. I'm working harder than ever on my comics. I work every day in the evening, and I'm still around. And I hope Zeros gets as you know, gets a bit of attention.
Which one artist or writer, living or dead, would you have liked to have collaborated with, and why?
That's a difficult question. I don't know. Maybe John Byrne from Marvel. I just think he was fantastic. You know, he's not afraid to pull his characters apart and turn them inside out and do some really terrible things to them.
Yeah.
So maybe if I was collaborating with him, because I think
Yeah.
you know, he's such a great writer and artist, I don't think I could do his stories justice. It has crossed my mind to kind of write something and get someone else to draw it, but
Right.
I really don't know who I would get to draw it. So, and I don't want to have to pay anyone. So.
It's always quite hard to collaborate as well if they don't work at the same pace as you, like, or you know, maybe it can be tricky.
That's a good point. That's a good point, because I don't really write scripts, because I don't have to, because you know, for myself, I don't need to write the full script, because
exactly.
I know what's going to happen. When my scripts are just dialogue. It's just what dialogue's going to appear in each panel, so I know that I know everything's going to happen.
Yeah, but what are you reading at the moment, though? What comic books are you reading?
There's a really good comic at the moment, The Immortal Hulk.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't read it, but
I can't recommend it highly enough. It's by Al Ewing, and I can't remember the artist actually, Joe Bennett, I think. And it's amazing. It just feels like a really solid, almost old-fashioned comic in a way, because every issue's got a beginning, middle, and an end, which you don't often get. And also it's like a 50-issue series, so it's got a shape to it, and it almost reminds me of Sandman in a way. It's
really wow.
The scope of it is really impressive, and the writing is amazing.
If people want to find you on the internet, where should people go to?
So I'd highly recommend the Zeros website. That's zeroscomic.com, at Zeros, ZEROS.
Right.
Okay, and then also Instagram. I'm on there if you look for me, Martin Eden, and all of my series have got their own pages on Facebook. So you've got the Omen, you've got Spandex, and you've got Zeros on there as well. So those are the main places. Yeah.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with Zeros. And
thank you very much.
Next up is an interview with my son, Emmett. This is Theodore. He is 5 months. He's the youngest. And Emmett is 6 years old. And he is going to ask me some serious questions about comic books and why I do them. Let's hear what he's got to say. Hello, Emmett.
Hello.
Are you going to interview me today?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go. You got any questions for me?
Varför do you really wanted to have to make one more comic?
I think, well, I grew up reading comic books. I used to read all the Marvel and DC comics when I was younger, and I always wanted to do the same thing and make my own comics like that. But you know, I never worked for Marvel or DC, so I had to do it myself. And yeah, it took me a long time to finally finish a comic book, but I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. We walk.
So, varför did you do a car in it?
The car for the car in the book.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool. I loved it. It's a 1970s rally car. It's called the Stratos, and yeah, it's like a classic car. I just love it. It's very nice.
Yeah. And varför do you work so hard for it?
Yeah. Well, some people play football. Some people, you know, bungee jump. I like to make comics. I think it's my hobby, and you know, one day it'd be nice to do it all the time.
Men our boss is just coming out 2 minutes to see. Yeah, 2 minutes.
Are we ready?
We're going to the car, the bakery, and I'll just finish my swimming.
Yeah.
And yeah. Varför
Why?
do you love comic books when you was little?
I loved comic books when I was little because we didn't have the internet then, and it was a fun way to entertain myself by reading a comic. Emmett, where you going?
I'm not in the film yet. Okay. I'm here now in film. Yeah.
You got any dance moves?
Jag kan köra från dansning.
I'll be there.